It's very important you fully prepare yourself for what you're about to see. No sudden moves.
I read that Laia is very scared of horror films and that Veronica even had to pause for the first time before finishing the script. What was that immersion like for you both? Were there any specific moments where you felt genuinely scared? Did the look of the mummy affect you or impress you both in any way? What was that immersion for you?
I would say every day we were shooting, I got scared or it was too much at some point. Seeing the mommy, like there's like a whole team to make those moments work, but especially on set, I would say you could feel that. And the immersion of something like that when you're not close to that kind of genre, I think I got into it from a very naive point of view. And then I found out all the magic stuff. Like now that I'm talking, I'm thinking that it was very interesting also to see how Lee was enjoying it so much. You know, he was so cheeky about all the craziness going on set. And that was also like very, very nice to see. But for me, it was like a new experience, totally.
For me, it was as new in the sense that the brain of Lee is astounding. You know, the kind of creativity, the talent, the ideas he comes up with are really quite something, and I love that part of it. But for me, yes, it is true. When I was reading the script for the first time, there is a scene that I had to pause, and I was like, "Oh my God!" You know, it's too horrifying. And then I continued reading it. And when I saw it recently, because I just saw the movie for the first time, that scene is beautifully done. I'm not performing in the scene. It's a scene that Laia, Jack, and some other members of our cast are doing. And I think it's extraordinarily made. But for me, you know, watching, I've always been very curious. I come from the theater, and I've been always curious about every area. So whenever I saw prosthetics at work, I would be just fascinated, just behind the scenes if I could, just looking at them. And I'm like, what does this do? And how does that do? So for me, it's almost like an experiment. You know, whenever I saw Katie, I almost wanted to touch her behind the scenes just to see how the prosthetics were in her skin. I would never do that, but you know, it was just like I was just curious about the precision that went into that and the artistry that went into that. And you know, when I was doing with my prosthetics team, it was the same thing. Fascinating.
Good to know. I also said that you, Veronica, mentioned that even though this is a very intense horror film, working with Lee is a lot of fun. What was the atmosphere like on set? Do you girls have any behind the scene moments that audience who might be terrifying watching the film would never imagine happen off camera?
Yeah, yeah, like quite a lot. I remember in the bathroom, we were just cracking us up, and it was like a very physical moment also. And we were like, the crew members were, "What's going on? There's a party? You're supposed to be really fucked up here." And
And we were laughing. Yeah.
yeah, we were laughing so much. Or when we were like trying to make someone else get scared with noises and stuff, and there was a lot of cheekiness around
Yeah.
those
I
very
have a phobia for loose hair. I don't like it at all. I really don't like it. And then, you know, I had to do this thing with I'm cleaning a brush. And then when I finished that, I said to Lee, you know, I didn't tell you, but I really have a phobia for hair. I was like, let's do it again with more hair. You have no idea. It was one of the most horrifying things for me to do as an actor. Everything else was fine, the coyotes, the whatever. But touching the hair, yeah, that was hard for me, and everybody was laughing about it, you know.
Don't worry, Grandma. It's fun to be dead.
I'm a big horror genre fan, and
Nice.
I already admired your work in Midsommar, one of my favorite ones.
Great,
And
great.
just like in that film, your character in The Mummy gave me chills,
Okay, good.
especially toward the end, his destiny.
Mm-hmm.
What draws you to these kind of roles, and how does this film reflect where you want to go as an actor?
Um, I'm a huge horror fan myself. I love the genre for a multitude of reasons. I think what's great about horror in a contemporary filmmaking climate is that you can make a horror film and take a lot of chances. You can experiment with things and it can still be really successful, at the box office or even critically. So I think there's a lot of horror films being made that are very psychological horror films that speak to the human condition. And then there's also big, like broad horror films that are being made because they're a lot of fun. I think there's a little bit of both in this movie. But I felt when I read this script that this was really going to stand apart from any other film that's been made in the legacy of The Mummy. This film has probably more in common with like The Ring or maybe The Grudge, those kinds of movies, than it does with, the sort of Brendan Fraser movies, which are a little bit more of like an adventure film that's more like an Indiana Jones adjacent sort of thing. So I was very excited to be part of this, and I'm a huge fan of Lee Cronin as well. He's an Irishman like myself. We had a lot of friends in common, so we were both very keen to work with one another, and I think he's a brilliant director. So.
You mentioned before that despite being a horror film, Lee's work also has a strong sense of humor, which I completely agree with,
Mm.
and that it made you excited to work with him as well. Now that you have experienced this on set, what was the most exciting part of working on this film, especially since it's such a different kind of horror from Midsommar, for example?
Well, I will say that working in Ireland with Irish crews, people who I've been friends with for years and years and years, was a big part of it for me because this is a very ambitious film. It's something very broad, and we were all really proud to make this at home in Ireland. Um, Also, the fact that Lee, as a director, hires people in every department, um, in good faith so that they are coming with ideas to him that he's going to want to use, that makes going to work in the morning very exciting. And, Lee and I are both big, big, big horror fans. We both have a sort of a vocational feeling about watching horror movies. And for us to be able to come into that studio every day and to come up with ideas together and like figure out the most horrific and gross and sickening way to portray something and shoot it for the theater, that was so much fun for both of us. We were like school kids.
Was there any particular scene that will make audience scream in their seats, but that you personally found fun or excited to
I
shoot?
think the nail pulling scene is absolutely horrific. I think
Yeah.
it's an assault on good taste, and I think it's probably the moment of the film that audiences will just never forget. We thought it was hilarious when we were shooting it on the day. So.
The Mummy is one of the most iconic horror films of all time and has had many different versions over the years. How did you approach this story to respect somehow tradition, and when did you start to feel free to make it your own story?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to that, as your question is. So I think I felt free from the beginning because you always have free will when you're writing a story, like in terms of what it is that you're trying to create. But I felt real freedom once I knew that I could tell a story that our mummy was for a different reason, mummification being used for a different purpose, not about a pharaoh, but about a little girl. Somebody that could be close to you, someone that could be familiar to you. And that was something that I found really attractive and kind of liberating, and just then wanted to embrace that and make things as original as myself and my team possibly could. Because I think one of the things I'm excited by is that people do have some preconceived notions about what this movie might be or should be, and they'll see a trailer and they might still think, oh, but I'll go, go check it out because it's very different. And I think it's unexpected.
The cast has mentioned your ability to blend intense horror with a touch of humor, something I also noticed in Evil Dead Rise. Do you think horror and humor can go hand in hand? Why was it important to explore this balance in this new version of The Mummy?
I think there's always that idea, they say there's a fine line between horror and comedy. This movie's not a comedy, but it does have plenty of levity and humor. And I think that just comes from reality because there is darkness in the film and there are dark moments and there are scary moments. But even in life, in dark and scary moments, funny things can happen. I'll always say people laugh at funerals, even though it's a sad time, or I'm not saying it's a dark time, but it's a sad time. So I think within a horror movie, if you can find a way not to tell jokes, but to have natural behaviors that can be humorous that come out of different characters. So there's a part in this movie, there's a wake scene, for example, and there's two women discussing the body that's in the coffin. And to me, that conversation sounds just like my mother's friends would have been, So it's humorous, but it's coming from a place of reality.
Yes, horror seems to be having a major moment right now with many acclaimed films recently, both original stories and remakes. Do you think The Mummy is arriving at the right time for the genre, and how does the movie stand out in this landscape?
It still has little waves within it, but it's been a really great period of time, and horror movies seem to be getting more respected and accepted more in the mainstream, as they should be, because they're really creative pieces of work. I think with my movie, what I'm excited for audiences is that it is a horror movie, but it is also some other things that you can enjoy. There's a great detective story and a mystery. There's a strong family drama, and there's a lot of heart, and there's a lot of love in the movie as well, despite the insane things that happen. So I think audiences, they want to go to the cinema, they want to be entertained. And I think it's important to, as a filmmaker, to work really, really hard to give audiences great value for their money and give them like a really spectacular experience. And I set out to make a movie that is an event, and I think we've maybe achieved that because it feels like something you need to experience in a theater surrounded by people.
It feels like this film could open the door to a new franchise of yours. Is that something you're aiming for? Would you like to expand this universe?
Like, I love the characters and I love the world. And it's obviously a story, even though most of our story takes place now and a little bit 8 years earlier, it's a story that has links going back thousands of years in our mythos. So there's great opportunities for a wider universe, but myself and Jason Blum and James Wan, and New Line, our approach would be, let's make the best movie we can. And if people love that movie, well, of course, we'll have a conversation about building out that world, but let's stay focused on just the movie that we've made and putting all of our energy and care and attention into that. But I definitely have ideas within that world and some characters that I'd love to explore further.
I just want my daughter back.